Are my clickbait titles getting better, Mommy? Yes, dear. Can you start recommending me more, Mommy? No, dear. Fuck! This review is not spoiler-free and contains content that may be disturbing to some. Viewer discretion is advised. Let's review every part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I said. It won't take too long, I said. Well, it only took me 2 years and a good portion of my sanity, but I'm finally on the, as of scripting, last part of the cartoon adaptation of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Golden Wind, aka the part that most people skip to on first viewing, then act like they know everything about the series. Golden Wind is pretty mixed among viewers. Either it's all hail the queer gangsters, or burn it in a fire and leave it to rot in a ditch. Personally speaking, I'm somewhere in between. Like the previous arcs in the series, I think Part 5 has its share of things to love and things to hate. It doesn't really matter because no matter what I say, I know I'm going to be killed by the end of this video. Honestly, not fast enough. One of the primary drawing points of Part 5's premise is that the main character is the biological son of both Part 1's antagonist and protagonist, Dio and Jonathan Joestar. Oh wow, so are we gonna have a story where characters from the previous parts have to decide whether they consider Giorno family or not? Or where Giorno has to decide what exactly he considers family and whether he wants to be a part of their lives through trials that show he's clearly connected to them yet different all at the same time? Or maybe because of his stand, he's always felt lost and like he doesn't know who or what he is, and he thinks meeting his kin will be how he finally learns, only for them to tell him that's something that he has to decide. Oh god, the story basically writes itself! No, instead we're doing gangsters and mafia. The fact that Giorno is Jonathan and Dio's son is only brought up in the first few episodes, then the only reference we get to it again are a few visual nods and him saying a few of Dio's catchphrases, and he never even learns that he's a part of this fucked up family or even meets them. Weak. Giorno being Jonathan and Dio's half-child is used more as an excuse to have him be related to the Joestars rather than an actual plot point. Which is disappointing because I know you could get an interesting story and character out of it. Sure, it'd be kinda dumb to take Dio using Jonathan's dick to make a baby, something super serious, but I don't exactly go to JoJo for big brain storytelling. But hey, no use crying over what could have been. This average buff, princess-haired, pimp-dressing 15-year-old is who we'll be following for this part, and he has a dream.
But nobody's gonna extinguish my dream. There's a dream burning in my heart, and I'm seeing it through no matter what. Come what may, I refuse to give up my dream. Nothing is going to get in the way of my dream.
Thanks. Also, yes, I am using the English audio because I actually really like the dub to this part. Come on, Griffin Burns as Doppio is the whole reason I wake up and get dressed every morning.
Well, I better get going. See you later, Mr. Froggy.
But please complain anyway, the YouTube algorithm seems to feed off of negativity. Why won't mommy love me? When watching Giorno's scenes, it becomes apparent that he's like the group leader, and that he brings them fortune. I know this because they literally spell it out for me.
It's like everything started being set into motion once that new guy Giorno got here. He's a crazy good luck charm!
I don't know where we'd even be without you. You've become our leader. There might actually be some hope for us yet. With you by our side.
You know, when I watched Diamond is Unbreakable and I saw how Josuke was able to help Okuyasu and Koichi grow as people, I didn't need them to have inner monologues telling me as such, because I have these things called eyes and a brain. Despite my many issues with him, I do find Giorno to be an enjoyable MC. Not necessarily a good one, but an enjoyable one. It's difficult to make a stoic and deadpan character entertaining, especially in a show like JoJo, but they managed to make him work as a good straight man who occasionally shows his more quirky side. I also think that making him a soft-spoken voice of reason is hilarious, given that his dads couldn't go 2 seconds without yelling. This arc mostly centers around entirely new characters. Returning from Part 4 are Jotaro and Koichi, but they only serve to give the Giorno is the son of Tweedledum and Tweedledee and he is good exposition. Then they vanished into thin air. Another character from Part 3 returns in later episodes, but I'll get to that later. I was also personally annoyed by Josuke only appearing as a still image, but whatever, I'm not the writer. One of the main appeals of Golden Wind is that almost all of the leading cast are given backgrounds that play a factor into their personalities and motivations. Giorno's life was given an upturn because he helped save a gangster, so he wants to restore the organization of Passion to its former glory before they sold drugs to kids by defeating the anonymous boss and taking his place. Bucciarati's life was destroyed because his father witnessed a drug deal, but he was saved by Passion. Therefore, he's more than willing to help Giorno defeat the boss and stop the organization's current drug deals. When he was a police officer, Abbacchio's partner was killed because of his own selfishness and weak will, so he has a cold demeanor and is one of the most willing to take risks. Misa used to be aggressive, free-spirited, and simple-minded, but became superstitious and calm under pressure after finding his strength and tranquility and experiencing an apparent miracle. When Narancia received help and genuine concern from Bucciarati after being betrayed and mistreated by his only male figures, he considered Bucciarati and his affiliates the kind of people he should look up to. Therefore, he's equally devoted to both and is the most aggressive of the group. And Fugo! He was mistreated and couldn't control his anger, but then he found acceptance with Bucciarati, and I guess he learned how to control it. But the rest of his scenes don't show him controlling it. I don't get him, honestly. Before we move on, I'm gonna take a break to rant about Fugo, the only character in the show whom I legitimately hate. So, he shows up, they give us his detailed backstory, he uses his stand once, and then he's gone. I just explained everything he does. In the scene where he leaves the group, they play it like he'll come back either to rejoin them or to be an upfront villain. Imagine how cool that would have been. They could have had him reappear during the climax in one of those "I'm gonna keep you from my master" scenes. And it could have been between him and Narancia since they already had a pre-established friendship. It could have demonstrated both sides' ideologies and where they truly place their loyalties, and how those two things could be enough to tear two friends apart and even lead them to killing each other. But as they die, they both still recognize each other as friends and respect that they've both died for what they believe in, even if those differing things led them against each other. But no, instead Fugo joins Jotaro and Koichi in vanishing into thin air as he's never heard from ever again, and Narancia dies in an out-of-nowhere spur of the moment because they couldn't think of anything for him to do in the climax. I'm not even gonna bother trying to compare this scene to Caesar's death or Ogiyasu's choice to live because it'd be an insult to compare them. Honestly, you could take Fugo out of the story entirely and only one fight would be different. We don't even see what happens with him when Giorno, gasp, becomes the next boss. Another example of a character with wasted potential is Trish, the boss's daughter. First, she's given the arc of learning how to care for others and herself and learning how to fight her own battles as she gets her stand Spicy Girl. The build up to her stand is done great, but the fight where she gets it is her only fight. Then she takes a back seat until she gets one minor thing to do in the climax before being relegated to an exposition dumper. There was so much they could have done with her when she finally comes face to face with her dad who tried to kill her, and they instead decided to do pretty much nothing at all. I get they wanted Giorno to beat the big baddie cause he's the main character and all that good shit, but at least have Trish do something more than just minorly inconvenience the guy. When they first met, he cut off her hand. If you can't think of anything major for her to do, at least have her return the favor. That'd be cool and show how much she's grown since then. At least characters like Abbacchio are more entertaining. He hates Giorno because... Seriously, I've seen most of the show multiple times for this video, and I cannot for the life of me understand why he hates him. Not trusting him at first I get, but Giorno's never really done anything for Abbacchio to hate him with such a burning passion.
Bucciarati, I don't know why you're placing so much trust in this new guy. But as far as I'm concerned, he is no associate of mine.
Giorno killed my mother and gave my father AIDS. He is not one of us! My issues with them aside, our main cast is pretty fun. They all have quirky and distinct personalities, and their interactions are probably the most entertaining parts of this arc. There's one scene where they're literally torturing a guy, and they decide to just start randomly dancing in a minute-long music number. All based off of 4 throwaway panels from the manga. God bless David Productions. Most of the stands in this part range from pretty cool to the most overpowered bullshit ever to stupidly awesome. One guy has a stand that makes people age rapidly until they die, and then his partner has an even scarier power, a fishing rod. One thing I particularly like about how this arc handles Giorno is that it's not afraid to show his stand gold experience in a negative light. After he accidentally brings Bucciarati back to life after being killed by the boss, making him essentially a zombie, he has to learn that there are moments when he can use his ability to give something life, and there are times when he shouldn't. The show also explores more on the lore of stands, especially the era that was introduced in part 4, which is really great to see. What's also great is that they reintroduced Polnareff from Part 3 to bring the arrow to the main cast while also explaining how he got into some beef with the boss that caused him to lose most of his limbs. Diamond is Unbreakable hinted towards the plot point of Requiem during their final act. In fact, Kira is technically the first character to have received this power-up. Goldenwood explores a bit more by showcasing how it doesn't affect two stands exactly the same, sometimes it doesn't affect them at all. While we're on the subject of stands, one thing I find especially interesting that I wish they did more with other characters is how Giorno and Mista occasionally combine their powers to make something new. It further explores the abilities of stands, and it cements the idea that they are a duo. Speaking of Giorno and Mista, I love how at this point the show stops trying to deny that it's completely gay and instead just embraces it. It's great. I hated Mista's Sex Pistols at first, but after my second viewing, I have no idea why. They're just adorable. They have this kindergartner dynamic between each other, with Mista being like an overly patient big brother. It's one of the things about Part 5 that simply makes me smile. I don't know why his stand made of cute little bullets was named Sex Pistols though. Doesn't really seem fitting. Wouldn't something like the Beatles have been more appropriate? But who cares about those stupid good guys? As is the case with pretty much every part at this point, the villains almost entirely managed to steal the show.
Why? Call the damn book Death in Venezia! It's not that hard!
Aside from the ones I've already mentioned, our villains consist of angry genderbent Elsa with Neko ears, a hot invisible guy who clearly never got out of his goth phase, and a mad scientist and his dog. The main villain of this arc, Diavolo, very subtle name by the way, having a name that literally means devil, is the leader of Passion and to everyone involved has always been anonymous. His name isn't even revealed until much later. The show manages to brilliantly introduce him as someone with dissociative identity disorder, or DID, his other personality being the character Doppio, aka my newfound reason to live.
I'm glad you weren't flattened. This is no place for a guy like you.
You deserve literally no wrong. The build-up to Diavolo through Doppio and how they interact with each other is unironically a fantastic example of building suspense. There's always this intimidating sense of mystery that lets you know there's a greater threat behind this meek and skittish boy. The portrayal of DID is also done surprisingly realistically. The original personality went through a type of trauma that caused the rift, which is how the disorder is usually developed. What I particularly love is that they don't directly state which of the two is the original personality, so you have the liberty to draw your own interpretation. I always thought that Doppio was the one who experienced trauma and thus developed Diavolo as a result. So Doppio is the side of him that doesn't remember the trauma, while Diavolo is the part of him that remembers and that has aged, thus he's used to keep the original personality from remembering certain things. Which is further iterated by him referring to Doppio with a nurturing nature by describing him as precious and cute. You could also interpret it as Diavolo being the one who experienced trauma and developed Doppio, a younger and more innocent side of him to help himself cope. It's also realistic for the personalities to communicate with each other in their heads. DID wouldn't make Doppio think everything is a phone that he can use to call Diavolo, but it's also very heavily implied that he has schizophrenia, plus it's adorable, so I don't mind it too much. The one thing that's unrealistic is the whole physically changing thing. While with DID, the alters can make a person change their normal posture and facial expressions, they obviously don't make their physical appearance age by 20 years and change the facial structure and body type. I'm also 50% sure they don't put pizza toppings on your hair. Still, I think we can all agree why that was done. If it wasn't, then Doppio and Diavolo would have the exact same design, just one would be more angery than the other, which wouldn't be all that visually appealing. Sometimes to make something interesting, you have to sacrifice realism. Alright, now that I'm done sucking this show's cock, let's talk about, without a doubt, the blandest villain of the series so far.
I'll kill you!
Again, I think the build-up to Diavolo was done really well, but there isn't much to him personality-wise. The previous villains in the show all had standout personalities from each other with defining characteristics, but Diavolo begins and ends with just wanting to keep his identity hidden, at least until he finds about the stand arrow a few minutes before his fight with Giorno, then it's his entire life goal. I find him to be more entertaining in the dub because Kellen Goff seemed to have just been given the direction to kill his throat.
Why couldn't I seize the arrow? It should have been so simple! How on earth did I fail such a small task?
But that isn't enough for me to say that I find him to be all that interesting once he's finally revealed. Kind of a letdown, honestly. In the manga, Diavolo Stan King Crimson was overly complicated. The description of its power was that it erased time. I don't think I need to explain how that's confusing. The anime changed the wording to that it skips through time, and it goes to show that it basically just makes Diavolo fast forward through time and other characters forget the time that he passed. Still kinda convoluted, but it makes more sense. Also, what is it with JoJo villains having powers that involve time? Is it like the golden rule of this universe that if you have powers involving time, you're doomed to be evil? Will admit, I'm not a fan of the art style in this one. The line work and coloring have this crummy look to them, and everyone looks like they put on too much eyeliner. The characters made to be in this art style look fine, but the ones from the previous arcs look absolutely awful. I am convinced that Part 5 Koichi is what you see before you enter hell. Despite the fact that I personally dislike the overall look, I will admit that the animation is done pretty well, for the most part. While most of the fights are animated fairly fluidly, they have the occasional David Productions flub. Then sometimes there's too much happening on the screen at once. The scenes where King Crimson is skipping through time I found to be especially hard on the eyes. Okay, before I talk about the climax, I know I'll get slaughtered alive if I don't at least briefly mention a certain famous moment from the Green Day and Oasis 3-parter, so I'll go ahead and get it out of the way. The scene with Chocolata and Stucco over the phone is the most precious moment in Part 5 that perfectly showcases the relationship between pets and pet owners.
Do that and I'll give you the bestest back scratch. And don't think I forgot the sugar cubes. Are you ready, boy? Here they come. How many you want? How about 2?
No! I want more! I want more! Want more!
All right, you rascal. I'll give you 5.
Wholesome shit, man. Oh, and I think the 7-page Muda is fine too. This moment adapts a beatdown from the manga that went on for 7 straight pages. The anime animates the scenes and the pages beautifully, and Kenshin Ono perfectly captures the raw rage of the character in the moment. If the rest of Golden Wind was of this high quality, I doubt there would be as many split opinions on it as there are. Now, you might be wondering why I switched to the Japanese audio just for this one scene. Don't get me wrong, Philip Reach did a fantastic job and he certainly exceeded my expectations. The sound mixer apparently didn't agree. Hey, guy, you might wanna... The music's a little loud! Imagine pouring your heart out for one of the most iconic scenes in the whole show, just for some asshole to fuck it all up for you. Can we get an F in the chat for Mr. Reach's efforts? It's a shame because I otherwise think it's another moment where the dub is better than the sub. What's amazing is that, according to Chocolata's voice actor, Bill Butts, his actual name, this scene in English was all recorded in one take, and all for it to be drowned out by the music. This story is the pure definition of tragedy. One thing I don't get about JoJo's English dub, why do they keep Dio and Giorno saying Muda instead of just having them say useless? Moving on, the last few episodes are probably the most underwhelming climax of the show. So first, Diavolo sabotages the group's meetup with Polnareff, and now he wants the Arrow to be the most powerful guy in the universe or something, I don't know. I'm not sure why he wants it. All he's seen from it after it pierces Silver Chariot is that it can make stands go berserk and have people switch bodies, but whatever, I guess Diavolo's not that bright. Long story short, once upon a time there was an angry pizza. He was so angry, everyone died. The end. By the power of being the main character, Giorno is the one who receives a Requiem power-up in the end, which gives him the ability to put Diavolo in a loop where he's forced to repeatedly die. You know, because almost every fight with Giorno so far has involved him using his quick thinking, I kinda expected him to beat Diavolo using brains over brawn instead of getting this overpowered bullshit. We all know that you can't top the 7-page Muda, but come on, try a little harder. Then for some reason, the last 2 episodes show an old mission that Bucciarati and his team went on before the events of this part. I don't know why. Let's see, something about a rock that predicts how people die, and it shows that the people who died in this arc were destined to die. Thanks. That was worth 2 episodes prolonging the end. We couldn't use that runtime to make the Giorno and Diavolo fight more impactful than it ended up being. Overall, while it's not as good as Battle Tendency or Diamond is Unbreakable, and while I do think it's a prime example of wasted potential, Golden Wind still manages to be pretty enjoyable. The main cast for the most part are likable, the fight scenes have a nice balance of creativity and suspense, the villains are some of the best the show's ever had, and it went on long enough to add some weight to the story without adding in too much padding. Still, there's a lot of things that could have been done better with some of the characters and several elements of the story. There's a lot of build-up given to the main antagonist only for him to have little to no personality, and the climax is about as impactful as a bug hitting a windshield. So if you're looking for a fun adventure story and are willing to forgive some problems, I'd recommend giving it a watch. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more JoJo content from me, my friend Durcoin and I did a video talking about the show's opening sequences over on his channel, and we're planning on making a follow-up to it on my channel hopefully sometime soon. It's been kinda difficult since we're like 5 hours apart, and by the time this video goes up I'll have started my second semester in college, so it's difficult to find a good time to work on it together, but we'll try to have it out as soon as we can. Alright, I've been talking for an hour, my throat is tired, but I'm gonna do the quiz thingy anyway. What's your favorite part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? My personal favorite is part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, because the main characters are precious babies, and the last 2 episodes made me cry. Leave your answers down below, and on the chance that I don't get killed for this video, I'll see you next time. Bye!